Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Wills, your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us today. We have the honor of having Keisha Blair. Miss Blair is a trained economist and has experience in the public, private, and not-for-profit sector. She was part of the Prime Minister's delegations to World Economic Forum in 2018, as well as the East Asia Summit in Singapore. She led events such as the Most Powerful Women Summit in Montreal, Canada, and the Fortune Global Forum. She is a graduate of the Executive Leadership Program at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government and has an MSc in Public Policy from Carleton University in Ottawa. She is the author of Holistic Wealth, 36 Life Lessons to Help You Recover from Disruption, Find Your Life Purpose, and Achieve Financial Freedom, and is the founder of Institute on Holistic Wealth. Welcome to Politics Done Right, Miss Blair. How are you doing today?
I'm good, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, you know, we'll have it no other way. Anyway, after getting your information that you touch on all the topics that we discuss here at Politics Done Right. So we're happy to have you. Thank you so kindly for being here with us. How are you doing?
I'm good. And how are you?
I am fine. Well, anyhow, let's get started. What's going on in the economy as you see it today throughout the world?
Yeah, there's so much going on, so much economic disruption, and I think we're all feeling it in our pockets. We see the rising food prices, rising oil prices, there's high inflation, interest rates are going up as governments try to stem the high inflation by using that tool of monetary policy. And so people will see their mortgages going up, they'll see the cost of living going up, and it will seem tight because salaries have been stagnant. But that's what's going on. And we know with the Russia-Ukraine war, that has caused several, disruptions to transportation, supply chain disruptions. Several products such as wheat, with the Ukraine being the world's breadbasket, have been affected. So I think that's what we're seeing. There have been predictions that it will get worse. We might be going into a recession towards the end of the year.
Let me stop you there because I hear those predictions all around. What are your thoughts and not the predictions? Because as an economist, what's your own belief as far as when you look at these stats that are really out there? Because I have some myself.
Yeah, okay. I definitely. So I do think that we will end up in some sort of a recession, based on when you look at history. And I did mention in my book too that, we've seen these crises before. I did mention the 2000 to 2009 period as the lost decade. And I had mentioned in the book too that I'm hoping that this one won't become another lost decade, but it's looking likelier and likelier given what's happening globally and geopolitically. Now, I do think we are headed there. But we have to watch to see what's going to happen. But as an economist, the signs are there, and it's a hard balance, right? With increasing interest rates, it's a hard balance with what's going on with war, with COVID-19. There's so many factors at play.
Ms. Blair, I am not an economist. I'm an engineer, but who studied economics in college as well. And one of the things that differs between, let's say, engineering and let's say the stockbrokers, et cetera, is we don't buy into what I like to call non-math. And I have you on as one of our of a leading economist. We're also having Richard Wolff on and a couple other economists on. And what I've been trying to do is probe economists as to what I call the insanity factor of our economic system, where we go through these things. I mean, you just mentioned in your monologue there that you hope this is not a lost decade, but based on how things are going, it just could be again. And unfortunately, based on how things work, I agree with you, sadly. But the insanity of doing things over and over again the same way puzzles me. So my question to you is, isn't it time for us to revamp the current model the current economic system that we have to one that actually makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm all for economics getting a refresh. I'm all for the economy getting a refresh. It's something I talk about in holistic wealth and why I even came up with holistic wealth. If we look at it at the economy from a macro perspective, there's so much income inequality. We have a racial wealth gap. We have certain groups that are shut out of this capitalist system. It's one of those pet peeves of mine too. And I see you smiling because it's an economy that's exploitative. We pull, 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 and we're not giving enough back. We're not giving enough back. And the system hasn't worked for a lot of folks. It hasn't worked for a lot of our minority communities, for our women, children, the most vulnerable among us. And so I definitely think we need a redistribution. I'm all for, when we talk about the racial wealth gap, we talk about reparations. I'm all for, policies like that, because I believe that there's some wrongs that weren't right, that weren't made right before. And we're going down a path that's not sustainable. COVID-19 showed us that it's not sustainable, right? And we look at the interplay between wealth, health, or mental health and all of that. It's showing us, and even the environment, it's showing us that we were not on a path to sustainability. We were doing the opposite. So definitely, it's one of those things where we definitely need to not think about going back to that old normal. We need to think about creating this new normal and what we want our post-pandemic lives to look like.
Now, where I think it's so important for what you write, what you promote, what you talk about to our audience and others, especially since you have the pedigree, the credentials to say it. I don't, you do, is to that people understand that an economy isn't something that is divine, or our economic system isn't divine. It is actually man-made. And notice I didn't say person-made. I said man-made for certain people who are invited into the game. And we need more people like you out there, not just activists like myself, letting people know how this is an economy that's actually behaving exactly as it should, don't you think? Or exactly as it was designed.
Exactly as it was designed. And it's unbelievable the level of income inequality that we have right now. And I mentioned in the book that it's the number one economic problem. It's the number one problem that we have in the world. When you look at the growth in incomes of billionaires during the first half of COVID-19, when you look at certain companies and how they profited from this, it's just unbelievable. And so we've set up an economy where a few benefit and the vast majority don't. We saw where the deaths took place. We saw the people who were most vulnerable out there, the essential workers, transportation drivers, mechanics, people going out there and facing it and dying, while others were more protected. Now, I do believe that we can, if there's that will, we can shape our economy to be more inclusive and to be more equitable. And I think that's the route we need to go when we look at our post-pandemic lives. We can absolutely reshape. We can absolutely start to right some of those wrongs. And we can start to look at having a post-COVID economy that's more equitable.
Ms. Blair, in the context of your book then, because a lot of this is covered, what can we do to empower folks? What are the 36 life lessons, or at least some of the 36 life lessons that folks should actually take into making a betterment for us all?
Yeah, so it can be looked at the personal level as well as the state level. And when we talk about, let's say, macro, the state level, in the back of the book, I have this holistic wealth index that is kind of like a framework that organizations can use, that state level governments can use.
I don't want to interrupt, but I have to. I don't want to interrupt, but I have to. What exactly is holistic wealth?
Yeah, so holistic wealth is the interconnection between these critical pillars. So it's the financial wealth, it's the mental and emotional health, it is your physical health, and your life purpose and spirituality and relationships as well in that. So all of that, I think, is that interplay between all of those factors, and why we need to look at our economy more holistically. We need to look at our personal finances and our lives more holistically. We've seen the great resignation wave. That's also part of that organic trend
Mm-hmm.
towards, I want to live a life that's more authentic. I don't want to be just a number or stat. I want to live that life that gives me that balance, that joy, that meaning. And that's what we've seen, some trends here
That is so true.
that have been basically predicated on this whole holistic wealth concept now for some time. It's just that it wasn't there before in terms of a book, and it wasn't there in terms of our vocabulary or way of communicating it. But all the trends that we're seeing now, with the passion economy worth over 80 billion, with the great resignation wave, with people looking at how they can live a more meaningful life. I mean, COVID-19 has spurred that. So when we think about holistic wealth, when we think about organizations, when we think about governments around the world, this is a tool, this is a framework that we can all use to shape this post-pandemic era. And it's so funny, in the book I talk about a little about economics too, and how we focus too much on our so you have these moral resources and the economic resources, and we focus too much on our economic resources, not enough on our moral resources. And our moral resources are our relationships, they're our people, our labor force, the partnerships, the way we collaborate to help each other, the way we reach out to help each other. Those are the moral resources that we'll need to pull in. We need to have an economy that's more focused on our moral resources when we shape our post-pandemic world, rather than those economic resources that we always think about. And so what we think about is in extractive terms, in exploitative terms. When we think about it in more moral terms, then I think we'll come closer to what we want that life to look like, what we want our economies to look like.
Miss Blair, I mean, I could not have said that any better. You're speaking directly to everything that I preach. Thank you. I mean, you do not know what it means to me to have an economist in the Western world say that. I'm going to have Richard Wolff on. I don't know if you ever heard of Richard Wolff right here in the United States. He teaches at not Yale, Princeton, I think it is, and he's going to be on with us. And he speaks the same language. And I've been trying to get more economists that can come out to the folks and let them understand that it's not solely about that economic piece that you speak about. Because
Right.
think about this, Ms. Blair, think about this. We have in corporations right now, the executives that, the what the workers have been going through over the last several years.
Yes.
And we also know that corporate profits are sky high, even in
Yeah.
they are sky high. And we have all these guys sitting pretty up there saying, well, I got me a great bonus. I mean, look how great we were able to increase profits, increase productivity, not realizing that that wasn't you doing it.
Right.
It was those guys down there doing it. But you're taking the spoils. Our economy is designed to be extractive, and the ones that don't work do it. And
Yeah.
it's folks like yourself and the book that you promote that promotes bringing people up that makes the difference. So I mean, you don't know how happy I am to have yet another economist validating particular these these particular issues. So tell me, how can we, first of all, I mean, it is hard for those who are in Panama, we would say, viviendo la vida loca, living that life. How do we get those that are living that life understand that what they're doing really is promoting what I call antiseptic slavery of the masses? How do we allow them to see that?
Yeah, I think it's just what we're doing here now. And it's unbelievable because I think what they're doing isn't sustainable long term. I think
Thank you for,
workers are
thank
going to,
you.
it isn't sustainable. It's an unsustainable model. You have to look at, you only have to look at what's happening with Amazon, with Tesla. Workers are going to wake up they're going to realize that this has not served them. It's not serving their families. This is becoming life and death. And some of the decisions that workers are making right now, whenever they step out to go to work, have been life and death during COVID-19. And COVID-19 has really shed light on that, the fact that it really is unsustainable. So they're building company models that are unsustainable, and they're building models that no longer work and will no longer work. That's why we have things like the passion economy, where workers are getting up on, Etsy, they're going on Shopify to create their own businesses, they're going on different
Hmm.
platforms to create their own business and really tap into their passions, into their skills and what they can provide. And so I think we're going to see a blossoming of more of that. The great resignation wave, when it started in 2020, people were saying, oh, maybe this will fizzle. As economists, we have not seen it fizzle. It's gotten worse. It's gotten more structured, more solidified. And I think it's something that they're going to have to wake up and realize. And companies are. They are waking up and they are realizing. So let's hope that it's for the good of all, it's for the benefit of all workers, that they do wake up and realize it's not sustainable. And of course, there are people out there, other economists like myself, who are also talking about this, trying to raise more awareness. You're also talking about it, and people are talking amongst themselves. I think we will see some change, hopefully for the better for all of us, so that we have a more economic model, a sustainable economic model.
Gar Alperovitz, he's an economist, a professor out here at, I think, I don't remember the American, I don't remember where it's at. He's a historian as well, which university he works with. But he started to talk about the collective, where I mean, instead of Exxon being run by all these executives, etc., that it's they have a collective body, and they grow together or they fail together, and if they fail, they fail, if they grow, they grow, but everybody partake of the spoils. It is,
Mhm.
as you said, it is something that I think, given the unsustainability of the economic system that we have, that we're going to have to get to. Now, fighting that 10% that controls everything, those that we call the managerial level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they're powerful. They're the ones that control the media. They're the ones that control everything. So uh, let me give an example. Programs like mine actually get throttled. So I don't know if you know the term throttle on the internet, okay, so we get throttled. So what we do is we have to go around it using old technologies and all of that to get our information to others. And it just slows down the process of educating the masses. But again, what you do, what you write, what you promote, and what others do, I think it is so essential for us to eventually break that glass. So before we go, tell us a little bit about in more specific to your book now, as opposed to just specific to what we're talking about. Talk a little bit about your book and why you think folks should get it, what they can get out of your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is Holistic Wealth, 36 life lessons to help you recover from disruption, find your life purpose, and achieve financial freedom. And as the book title suggests, there are 36 chapters there that cover off a whole bunch of different lessons that help you to really, find meaning, purpose in life, and of course, in terms of that financial pillar, to achieve financial freedom. And I think, with what we started off talking about with the economy and the high inflation and people really feeling it in their pockets, it's a really good time for us to focus on, the financial piece, on the mental health piece, and all of that's covered in the book. And there's strategies in there that people can use in terms of getting out of debt, how you budget, your money management, investing for the long term. And of course, there are pieces in there in terms of, like finding a personal mission and how you write out your personal mission statement and living with purpose and meaning. And so this book has been, very dear to me. It stems from my personal story of having been widowed at only 31 and having to go through that grief and really, go through that disruption and master it. And so there's a whole thesis in the book about Mastering the Art of Recovery from Disruption. And I know we're all collectively in that space right now, even if you haven't lost a loved one, or even if you haven't, gone through any major disruption aside from COVID, that we are still in this collectively. We are still in this period of disruption where we're looking for answers, and we're looking for a way out. We're looking for a way to craft that life that we really want. So this book is a tool in that toolkit. It's very good for really getting practical tips and strategies for crafting that, living a life of holistic wealth. And so it's available everywhere online right now, and in bookstores, and people can just grab a copy. It's also a great gift to give. And it's so in line with what we've been talking about, and how people can really take hold of their lives, get their power back. Because I know with this economy, a lot of people feel powerless. A lot of people feel like they've lost control of their lives because of the type of income inequality and the wealth gap that we've seen. But here are some strategies here that can make you feel more empowered to take the decisions you need to own your life and to take back some of that control. So I'm happy to share it, and I'm glad that we can have this conversation, because there are things we can do. It might feel like everything's out of control, but we do still have a lot of control in terms of our own personal lives.
Let me tell you, I never feel out of control. I always feel in control and going out there and getting a damn thing done. So, and that's what I try to promote on my program. And that's why I have people who think the same way, like you went out there and did something about it to empower others. So I think that is just wonderful that's out there. And I definitely want to promote not only personalities, but books and all of that, that's empowering people, as opposed to being, as you mentioned before, that extractive, taking something and leaving nothing back. The last question I always ask my distinguished guests is, what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
Wow, that's a tough one.
It's usually so.
It is tough. I can't think of anything. And I can't think of anything right now. I think the points that I brought forward are points that were perfect for the show and for people listening in. But yeah, I think it's been great. I can't think of anything.
Well, you know what? That means I kind of did my job. So look, I appreciate that. Look, Miss Keisha Blair, a trained economist and with extensive experience, and the author of Holistic Wealth, 36 Life Lessons to Help You Recover from Disruption, Find Your Life Purpose, and Achieve Financial Freedom. It's been my honor to have you on Politics Done Right. Thank you so kindly for having been here.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join. We have the honor of speaking to Darius Kamali. Darius is a former analyst with the State Department, supported International Monitor Institute, the Visual Evidence Wing for several tribunals on war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. He transitioned to political documentary, then to television and feature animation producing in Hollywood, as executive producer on a number of movies. Recently, the global pandemic provided the opportunity, like it has done for so many people, to change things around, and the catalyst for Kamali to return to his roots and his passion with two genre-bending, timely, thought-provoking, critically acclaimed books. First one titled Mistake of Identity, and the second one, Dog Whistling Dixie Past the Graveyard. First of all, welcome aboard Politics Done Right. Darius, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Barely recognize myself with that intro there.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, you're an important man with many different what should I say? Many different options. Okay.
Many different hats. How about that?
Many
Yeah.
different hats. That's what,
Yeah.
sometimes you're looking for that word that just doesn't come to you. A word as simple as HATS, hats.
There you go.
All right, let's get busy. Why mistaken identity? Why dog whistling Dixie past the graveyard? One of them actually seems sort of poetic.
Interesting that you say that. I don't know if people have defined both of these as poetic, but I'm not sure if they're traditional poetry. They're not traditional anything. I would say they're maybe genre benders is the best way to describe
That's how we
them.
named it, yeah.
There you go. Without describing them, they're in very broadly speaking, there is some poetry, especially in dog whistling Dixie past the graveyard, which obviously is a term that's composed of three different expressions there. That's somewhat lyrical, but I would say they combine several genres. One of them is in the Eastern tradition, there's such a thing as a Zen koan, right? Which is meant to be a riddle and a brain breaker to take you to another level of understanding. Then there's also the tradition that we had in the 19th century in the United States, which people have forgotten about, the aphoristic tradition. And of course, they're partly contemporary tweet, with people's attention spans these days. I think it's a good fit, and I didn't plan it that way. I was during the pandemic just writing down some of my thoughts and putting them down on social media, but sometimes in hidden formats, so only I would see them, just so that they're not lost.
Well, it's your story. It was your story. It was your cloud.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And later I realized, there's enough here to categorize and put out there as, books, or they're small books. They're light reading in the sense that, you can come back to them and go through them very quickly. But hopefully in terms of content, a little heavier than that.
Well, I mean, from what I've read of it, it's not heavy. I mean, you can write heavy stuff in a form that makes it palatable to read. In other words, you want to put things in some sort of a format that educates, illustrates, but at the same time, you want to read. And that's what I think. I think that is where you're trying to go, if you will.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's exactly it. And you know what? I didn't sit and decide I'm going to devote this much time to writing these books. They were just ideas that came to me. And obviously, they're informed by my background, by my personal experience, both my ethnic experience, my professional experience, both in Hollywood and before that in human rights, NGO world. And so, it's a culmination of my entire life's experience to some extent. And when you said timely, it's interesting. Unfortunately, it seems that they're timely, right? It seems like some of these timely issues have been with us forever. And in a sense, maybe at least the issues are timeless.
Well, let me first of all, you talk about it. A lot of this is drawn from your experience. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you before we get into, because I'm going to want to hit up the topic on identity and hit up the topic on what's the word to take you out. What's a famous word that we're using today? I don't know what's wrong with my mind today.
Woke?
Erasing you.
Is that one? Well, there's so many.
You. Yeah.
Yeah, the one word that I use, there's so many directions to come at it. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying before that, tell us a little about yourself.
Oh, sure. Well, I've sort of had three phases to my career, and it looks on the surface that they're unrelated. And in a sense they are, except that I went through all of them. I originally started in human rights, you could say. I worked as an analyst for something called the International Monitor Institute, which was an NGO, a non-governmental organization. However, it turned out that we started getting government money. So that's a whole other story. And I got to see as a green young man how it is that the government can actually step in and control you, not by sending you to Siberia necessarily, but just waving some money, right? And from that point onward, it amazingly turned out that they had a say-so in what we should concentrate on and what we shouldn't. to put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to see that firsthand and transitioned from there. I was an analyst for War Crimes Tribunal, I should put it that way. The IMI was the visual evidence wing for some tribunals for the former Yugoslavia, for Rwanda, the ethnic cleansing and genocide that went on there, and for Iraq. And that was my specialty, Iraq, the former Ba'athist regime and Saddam Hussein. From there, I transitioned to documentaries. First, more, you could say, political documentaries or human rights related, child soldier, so on and so forth. And I discovered that as my role grew from originally just a researcher to then becoming, segment producer, associate producer, a field producer, whatever these titles were, that the nature of the documentaries became more and more commercial, right? And that's, bound to happen here in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
And then I transitioned entirely into something else, which is the world of animation, with a film called Igor, the first animated feature film that was made by an independent rather than by a studio back in 2008. We've done a couple of more since then for Netflix and Amazon Prime, and really was tied up in that world and augmented reality as well up until the pandemic, when I had some time on my hands suddenly that was forced on me like so many others. And that allowed me to really decide to go back to my roots, which is ideas. I was a philosophy major and a person interested in the root of issues rather than just the surface momentary
Deeper.
politics of it. Yeah. And so, the pandemic gave me an opportunity. In fact, the story that I usually tell is that, I discovered myself recently that the word radical is an ancient, do you know where I'm going with this?
Yes.
Yeah, is ancient Latin and ultimately Greek word, which means the root. And so in that sense, I would describe these books as radical, the sense that they're trying to get to the root of the issue rather than just the surface momentary politics of the day and the particular mask or jargon.
Now, how do you describe identity in America?
Well, I would say I don't know if I would describe it as any different in America as anywhere else. I think it's deeply ingrained in us, including myself. I don't exempt myself from any of this. I think it's a way for us, even perhaps at a biological level, to differentiate, maybe at a genetic level. But once you associate with a certain group based on any characteristic you choose, then anyone that doesn't share that particular characteristic is the out group, right? And so one of my fundamental sort of ideas here is that I'm fine with concentrating on the specifics, Black versus white, gay versus straight, whatever, nation versus nation, tribe versus tribe, and we can play that game, and I'm happy to play that game. But ultimately, unless we see that these are just all manifestations of a larger term called groupism, I'm calling it groupism, and it's an inelegant term, but I haven't found a better term that encompasses all of these things, then we're just playing a sort of, I say this in one of the books, I forget which one, a sort of musical chairs. If anyone remembers that game from childhood.
Who's the one that's left out?
That's right. Who's the one? That's right. And so, we can concentrate on, is it the people with the blue masks that are going to be standing up when the music stops, or the people with the red masks? But ultimately, wouldn't it be better if we just added a couple of more chairs rather than, so a positive solution rather than a negative solution based on need. And that seems obvious when put that way, but unfortunately, I think it's not so obvious the way our brains and our psychology is constructed.
And why don't you think we put the other two chairs?
Well, there's times where you can't, right? There's actual limits to goods and services and so on and so forth sometimes. But I make a distinction between discriminations that are necessary, hypothetically, and I'm not saying which one, and those that are not. At the very, very beginning of Mistake of Identity, I write something that's proven to be very controversial because, the left doesn't like
Let me
this.
hear it.
Sure. Yeah. it's basically, and I'm paraphrasing it poorly here, but an idea that I had back in my college days that, let's say a teacher, a professor has 5 slots, 10 slots, whatever the case may be, to take 10 students on a field trip. And it's really 10, it can't be any more. And if the teacher were to say, I'm going to, draw straws or pick, balls out of a hat, whatever the case may be, people would be okay with that in a sense. They would still be upset if they're left out, but they wouldn't feel that they were left out particularly because of, let's say,
Some
race.
externality, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So they wouldn't say it's unfair. But what is it that makes that process okay? It's random. And what is random but arbitrary? Well, what if the teacher were to say, well, I'm going to take the African Americans in the group because there's 10 of them happens to be. Precisely because it doesn't matter. Precisely because their race should be ideally as irrelevant as a random draw. Mm-hmm. Now, everybody would be up in arms, of course. No, you're doing it because you're racist. And maybe he is doing it because he's racist, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be that he actually doesn't even
that's a difficult one, right? Because
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, how do you interpret that? I mean, if you could be pure and saying that given that we want race to be irrelevant, just using that as a discriminating factor because you only have 10 slots would be okay. But in today's society, that sort of a analysis it's catered by history, right?
Yeah, no question. No question, because then you would have to show, first of all, was it a necessary discrimination, or was the teacher just being, did he actually have a bias there?
Right.
And that's and so, but that example is simply to make the case that ideally that's what it would be, right?
And I at first when you said it kind of, it held me aback, but I'm an engineer, so when I looked at it from a numerical point of view, it's like, okay, when they're doing it randomly, why? I mean, again, if we claim that we should all be race biased, we could say, well, we'll take all the, so I see your point. I actually see your point.
I'm glad you said, because to me, I'm glad you said you're an engineer and you see it numerically, because that's actually the perspective that it's coming from. There's a theory in the moral philosophy and ethics, utilitarianism, and there's multiple variations of it, but it ultimately has to do with maximizing happiness for the largest number of people, assuming that all souls are equal, right? All else being equal. And so from that perspective, again, if 5 people are left out, 5 people are left out. And if you are more upset by the fact that those 5 people happen to share an arbitrary characteristic, then I would say you're the groupist. But so it's counterintuitive. I understand this, and it can be abused, and it has been abused. But once we see that may actually be, at least from a utilitarian perspective, the ideal, then it sheds a new light, right? Because the alternative is what? The alternative is for one group, to feel aggrieved, and it's not just one group. Everyone can come up with things that have happened to them, and not incorrectly. These things have happened and are happening. I don't mean to minimize that one bit or say that it's not correct. The issue is, what's the solution? Right. What's the solution? So that we don't end up in the same boat next year and the year after that and the year after that. And I believe that, mystics, whether it's in the Western tradition or the Eastern tradition, have always sort of seen this. This is not a new idea at all. But is it possible to apply this concept of a soul is a soul is a soul to our politics? Without it being misused by the right to just keep people down?
Don't you think we could, if it weren't such an effective tool? Because my contention, and if you I don't know how much of my show you've ever watched, but my contention is that that our economic system and our etc. needs to have us at each other's throats, in other words, in order to thrive. Because if you actually stop looking at you and me as the enemy, we start looking at the economic system, the design of the economic system, as the real enemy. Because again, in what economic system can the few profit from the many and the many just accept it?
I don't disagree with that. In fact, I am completely, on your side. And if you put it that way, I think that groupism is used by the powerful to set people against each other, and distract them from the fact that we're all essentially being robbed blind.
Right.
And my issue is that people who are ideologically, and this is in the American context now, specifically today, hung up on party, on Democrat versus Republican. And I'm not saying there isn't differences between them, there are, but hung up to that, to the extent that it becomes another groupism where they can't judge a case, an issue case by case on its merits. They judge it more either instinctively or consciously or unconsciously based on, is that my group doing this or not? If we have time, if I could just jump into the Ukraine-Russia thing for a moment. As an example.
I tell you what, hold that thought right there, because I want to bring you, now that you talk about the Democrat-Republican thing, right now, I'm a Democrat because I caucus with the Democrats, but I'm a Bernie Sanders kind of guy, because that is where you can actually, in our current today, is where you can affect policy. If I were in the 60s, I would probably be a Republican, because that is where policy was effected to bring, let's say, civil rights, except for Johnson, who was a Democrat. It was a lot of Republicans that brought
That's right, they switched.
Right. So, I mean, so what I'm saying is, for me, it's not about party. For me, it's about getting effective solutions. And to do that right now, it doesn't occur in there's a particular party where it doesn't occur in. And that's the only reason I would call myself a Democrat. I just wanted to put that.
Yeah, no, I understand. In fact, I have had the thought, and I'm not the only one, the last several years, that the old notions of Democrat, Republican being left and right are really outdated in this
completely
country.
Because they're neoliberals and all that. You have
Absolutely
to get all that picture. A neoliberal is a Democrat is no different than a neoliberal Republican.
A Republican, absolutely. A Hillary Clinton, type of Democrat to name names here, or neoliberal, or in fact, I think the neocons and neoliberals are the same.
They're all in the same, and
Absolutely.
they just have different bases that they have to support, right?
That's right.
And I always talk about them being the rails. In other words, the left rail and the right rail. They keep this. They both move in the same direction, right? You have two rails. You have a left rail and a right rail, but guess what? They're moving in the same direction.
Yeah, it's a good cop, bad cop. It's a shuck and jive. Yeah, it's.
But anyway, right. You wanted to bring in Ukraine. It seems like we're going to move this interview in more of a conversational type. So go ahead and move it on, because this is not in your book. So let's have it.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, it's unavoidable right now. I have very conflicted views on this, because obviously, no question, what's going on is horrific. No. I mean, doesn't really need to be said. Any kind of aggression, war, the refugees, people being killed, is a horror show. The issue that I have with our media, our Western media as a whole, and its coverage, is that it seems so suddenly aware of things that our own government is doing on a regular basis as policy. I mean, as we speak, what's happening in Ukraine is happening in Yemen by the Saudis, backed by the United States. The United States is helping them with arms, money, intelligence, backing groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Yemen. And we've done the same thing in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria. I can name 100 examples from the Monroe Doctrine onwards, right? And it's so amazing that despite all of this, having come out for years now in academia, that the media can so quickly just become the lapdogs, in my opinion, of the Pentagon and White House and CIA. And once again, this is not to diminish what's happening in Ukraine. That's real. But it's just astonishing to me that there's no self-consciousness going on, self-awareness that what the Russians are doing is very similar, unfortunately, to what the United States has done and does on a regular basis as policy.
I am impressed, may I say. I'm originally from Panama, Central America. 1989, Brother Bush, older Bush, sent the military in there, killed over 10,000 Panamanians. It's reported as 4,000 some places, 1,000 as others. It is no different than how the Russians indiscriminately kill to get what they want. They wanted Manuel Antonio Noriega. They got Manuel Antonio Noriega at the expense of 10,000 Panamanians. So absolutely. Yes, all the superpowers do the same thing. And I'm glad that you coined it exactly as I've done in several of my programs. We must go ahead and state that Russia is doing a horrendously evil thing, but let's use that and put that in context to what happened in Granada, to what happened in Panama, to what happened in Santo Domingo, to what happened, and we can name. You actually went overseas. We don't even have to go overseas. We
Vietnam,
can stay right
absolutely
here.
Right here. Yeah, yeah.
We can stay right.
You know, there's I don't know if he's an anthropologist by trade or a sociologist, but he's a famous writer by the name of Jared Diamond here at UCLA, close to where I live. And he wrote something that I agree with strongly some years back. He did a description of all the genocides and ethnic cleansings and that have happened just over the last 100 years. And he pointed out that in terms of the media coverage, when it's the out group that's doing the aggression and the victim is the in group, then the media of the in group goes nuts, as they should. When it's the in group committing the atrocities, it's minimized, it's ignored, it's even encouraged, unfortunately. And when it's two groups that you don't really care about, it's sort of neutral. The media barely pays any attention.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that I'm glad that you brought up the latter, because there was somebody who asked, I don't remember what interview, when one of these right-wingers were really attacking Biden for, Biden's response, and the other guy said, how come we're just talking about this? This is happening all over the world right now. You're not actually, it was an interview with the redhead that I really like the way she answers questions because she's so good at it. And that is Jen Psaki being interviewed at the White House. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's a White House spokesperson. And they asked her about, Yemen and all of that. And she came out and she honestly said it. I don't think the people in Yemen would think it's not relevant. I don't think the people in Ethiopia would think that it's not relevant, that we are not going in there and fighting on their behalves.
Yeah,
so absolutely. Why should we go in and fight on the behalf of Ukraine? It's horrendous to see the kids that Russia is killing. It's horrendous to see the destruction that's going on. But I think you hit the nail on the head.
I think that in the book I say something along these lines. I think the moment that you start to care about another person that you don't know, I add the term "you don't know" because clearly, if it's a family member or a friend, we're going to be biased, and that's just natural. But all else being equal, the moment I care more about someone who I don't know in Botswana, more or less than someone I don't know in Milwaukee, that's already the beginning of the end. There's no coming out, there's no solution to that game. And of course, we all do feel that way, whether we say it or not. If you put it that way, people realize, well, it's unfair. But at the same time, every country says America first or Russia first, whatever the case. Why Russia first? Why America first? Now, if it's because of an actual ideology, I'm all for that. I get it. I'm not one of these hippy dippies, as they say, I don't think all ideologies are the same. I don't think cultures are the same. In fact, I'm all for cultures competing with each other and showing that they may be better for the human condition than another culture. But that gets conflated and confused with the arbitrary characteristics that we did not choose. So when someone says I'm a Christian or a Muslim, how often is it that they've actually studied these things and come up with a rational decision as an adult? I would respect that much more. But almost always it happens to be where they were born. It's an identity. It's an identity and not so much a chosen ideology.
Absolutely. So let me tell you, Darius, we've gone through a whole lot. We've taken the let me first tell you, whenever you come to Politics Done Right, I always give the latitude to my guests to take the conversation wherever they want to take it, but they must remember that we are in a limited time space when we speak. I think everything that you've said, been ingenious. I think folks need to go ahead and pick up your book is sort of on the philosophical, good type of reading type of a deal. I think folks should go ahead and pick up both of your books because it's worth a read. And if you listen to what you have to say, I am so sure that people are going to enjoy this. So what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
Well, you've done a good job here. I would end with a sort of I guess a paradoxical analogy. In our language, in our syntax, in our grammar, we use the term, we say that I have a body, right? We don't say I am a body. And we also say I have a brain. Again, we don't use the possessive. We use the possessive. I have a brain. We don't say I am a brain.
We don't say we are. We say it is ours. Yeah.
Have a possess. That's right. And even more strangely, we even say I have a mind. We don't say I am a mind. And now that's sort of weird, isn't it? Because what is the thing that has the mind if it's not the mind itself? I would say whatever that thing is identical in you and in me, right? Our experiences, our bodies, our memories are different, but the thing that experiences these things, that ultimate subjectiveness, is identical. And that's actually, I'll hold up the book here. The symbol on this book, which means Atman in Hinduism, in that sense, we're all one. And if we can spiritually realize that while we are playing these political games and these cultural games, that that I know, that that ultimately we didn't choose this, right? That might do a little bit in unraveling this tangled mess we have in our politics, both domestically and internationally.
Let me first say before I close out, Darius, I think that was excellent. That is, I think if we can get people to think like that, realize that these are just, color, identity, and all of that. While I believe we have to play identity politics until identities are no longer matter, it will no longer matter if we adapt exactly how.
Absolutely. But by the way, I agree with that point as well. I don't think you should unilaterally disarm.
Exactly.
That's right.
Darius Kamali, it's been my pleasure to have you on the show. The name of the two books, and I'm repeating them here because this is the kind of thought process I want more Americans to have. Mistake of Identity and Dog Whistling Dixie Past the Graveyard. It's been my honor to have you on Politics Done Right. Darius Kamali.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
There's only one group that's succeeding from these wars, and that's a war industrial complex. This stuff about revenge, taking revenge for what one group does to the other. I want to ask everybody a question. If you think about it, these groups that are unaffiliated, let's say Hamas, let's say the Houthis, all these other groups that operate outside of an official government. There's one thing that's interesting. They are all well funded with arms sales. They all have arms. Their people may not have food to eat, but they sure as hell have a lot of bombs to drop and missiles to launch and bullets to shoot. You have to wonder when we are going to grow up and figure out, wait a minute, how can all these terrorist organizations and all these other groups get all these sophisticated arms from Russia, America, Brazil, Israel, etc.? How can that be if these are struggling organizations trying to look for freedom? We've always been played. And the war machine that you talk about, Jack, is exactly how we constantly are played. And all the cogs, all the widgets that take the fall are the human beings. The 1,200 dead Israeli citizens that were good citizens near the border of Gaza, who were progressive liberal folk who said we need to get along, but they bore the brunt of the terrorist killers from Gaza. And then the purported response from Israel. And notice I said the purported response. right? That now has killed over 40,000 innocent Palestinians. Who benefits? It's something that's not going to change, right? These cousins have been, because of external forces, been at each other for centuries, right? And it's not the regular people that fight. It's when the top of one side is mad at the top of the other side, then they send the people in to die to see which one have bigger pelotas. At some time, it has to stop. You listen to how we Americans, many times we speak about these wars, etc. It's like, oh, who has a bigger gun? Are we going to let them take advantage of us? We have to show power. Look, the ones who showing power, whether it's Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or anyone else, not one of them are going on the battlefield. At least the Kennedys at one time, they were flying a lot of these planes, so they had a stake in the game. But all these people pushing for war, etc., they don't have a stake in the game. Just innocent people die. And then we, the peons, if somebody talks in a pacifist fashion or sounds like they want war to end, they get accused of being weak or not promoting our national security. And then at the same time, we talk about loving our fellow neighbor and loving man and the sanctity of life.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans